Our topic today is called quite broadly, which is strategies for appropriating somebody's text in your article. We put here in the title the word article, though if you are interested in writing some other, genres of text, you would definitely find today's information useful as well. Okay, so our plan for today is the following. Well, first of all, we will revise some techniques of paraphrasing and successful paraphrase. We will as well revise reporting verbs and what summaries are and actually how to make them. Everything is going to be practical, so I'm not going to talk like a lot. I have a few slides on, some theoretical parts, but mostly that would be practical exercises. And the last one and the biggest part would be practicing using different techniques to actually appropriate someone's ideas into your text. So the final part of our webinar today, there will be a primary source, a text taken from a primary source, which you will have to somehow use, process, and then put into your small writing. This is, well, the way we've planned this webinar today, okay? So first of all, there are three strategies or three different things you can do with a source of a different author and how you can kind of appropriate it for your text. So I ask you to look at these three sentences, three definitions of these strategies and try to identify them. So coming back to our slide, the ideas, how to put ideas into your writing. So if you present the main points of a statement or a narrative, what do we usually call it? Let's say we're talking here about like summaries, paraphrases, references, citations, these things. Yeah, and summary it is when you present the main points. Okay. As for the second one, direct quote, and the last one then, this is paraphrase. So that would be our main focus today, especially seeing the difference between summary and paraphrase. If we compare summary and paraphrase, I'm pretty sure you know that, but I wanted still to go through this quickly. So when you paraphrase, you obviously rewrite information, but you do not change any meaning, right? And the main idea that though like you're using someone else's text, you still need to use your own words. And this is the tricky part, right? So you need to leave meaning as it was. However, you need to use your own words. And because you include in your rewriting most of the content, because paraphrase can't eliminate things, right? The length is usually more or less the same as the original. That's important, right? So when you use a strategy of appropriating material, you might also be thinking in terms of length and also piece which you are appropriating. If you have a paragraph, you might probably use a paraphrase. However, if you are using a longer pieces of text, summary might be more useful, obviously, right? So summary would be shorter than the original text. Summary might be around 20% to 30% of the original text. So yes, it's 1/3, I would say less, 1/3, it's quite a big summary. So when you write your text, and if you see that your appropriation gets as big as the original one and you are summarizing, probably that's not a good idea. Why I'm talking about all this is because if we're doing it in not the way that is, let's say, appropriate, then we are at the risk of plagiarizing, and this is the biggest risk, right? We're meeting here. So let's talk about paraphrase. So as we remember, paraphrase is your own explanation or interpretation, right? And it's very important that when you paraphrase, you're not just saying, he said this author said that. Even if you're using fancy words, something like claim argue, state, and report, you're not just enumerating someone else's ideas, right? Because I've seen writings of my students who are just, bursting out with lots of paraphrases or quotes or summaries, but there is no idea of the author, and I need to look for it. So it's always, you're using paraphrase together with other strategies to support your point of view, right? It's obvious, but sometimes we forget because there is always this temptation just to quote other people or paraphrase them. Paraphrasing in academic writing is an effective way to restate, right, clarify, and of course it's about credibility. And as I said, if it's not successful, if something goes wrong, or we don't use the strategies very effectively, we might unintentionally plagiarize our work. Of course, we don't mean to do it, but it might happen. This is exercise 1. So what I want you to do, there is this text in the table, which is the original text. Then there are ABC, 3 variants that were somehow, processed and changed. And you need to understand which variant is which. So do we have any paraphrases here? Do we have any summaries? What do we have? And one of these variants was inadvertently plagiarized. So you need to understand which one. C is plagiarism, A is a paraphrase, and then B, logically. So obviously we're talking about 3 things here: plagiarism, and we figured out that this is C, and then we have summary and paraphrase. Which is which? We have A and B. And again, I will remind you that we're talking about certain length, right? Summary is probably, if you're looking at least at the length, it should be shorter than the original text. If you're looking at a paraphrase, it's more or less the same. It leaves us, number 1 is a summary, then B is a paraphrase, and C, an inadvertently plagiarized text, right? And I'm pretty sure you understand why it's a plagiarism, because there is no reference here, right? And if you forget to give any reference, then it would be considered plagiarism and it will be penalized. How strictly it's going to be penalized, that depends on the source, obviously, right? But generally that's the rule. Okay, now let us try to do short summaries. There are 3 texts here. Oh, sorry for the numbers. Of course, it should be 1, 2, 3. For each of these pieces, I would like you to create a summary. Remember, summary, it's shorter than 1 line. It should be really, really short, about 20%, okay? These texts are, let's say more on the formal side, neutral / formal. So if you have the same register, that would be great. Don't go into informal, but if your text, if your summaries are neutral, it's also okay for the sake of the exercise. But try to avoid informalities like phrasal verbs or something like this, okay? I will be saying a few words about your variants, okay? So first of all, if I even look from away, like from a distance at your variants, my first idea would be the length of phrases. If there is a long sentence about 2 lines, I would be thinking, is it really a summary or is it closer to a paraphrase, right? So summaries work really as a putting idea in a nutshell. And I know that for many people, it might be difficult because we are afraid to sort of miss something out and we think, oh, maybe and this element is important and that is important and something else is important. Here you really need to cut it down and be like sort of cruel in a way with the text. Very similar ones. Let's have a look what they suggest. This was taken from a practice materials, and I didn't make them up, so you'll have just to look at the originals here. So the first one says, many learners find English pronunciation difficult. Well, does it summarize the text? Yes. You might be concerned about the formality level, but I told you, you might go into neutral and it's absolutely fine here. Of course, it depends on your text, what you're using it for. But this one, it's a, well, valid summary. As for the second one about food and solid food, what do we have? If you don't eat, you get unhealthy. Okay, though probably fatal, it's a little bit more than unhealthy. Someone is writing about, yeah, inability to digest solid food for a long time is fatal. Interesting. Some people are writing unhealthy, others are saying fatal. That's different degrees, right? Lack of food may lead to fatality. That's also quite a big thing, right? It's quite dangerous. What do we see in this phrase? Fatal conclusion. Yeah, so it's not just being having health problems or health issues. I would go with fatality, death. If you're using summary, you might be using synonyms, right? And let's say maybe instead of using fatality or fatal, you might come with the word death or mortal. Let's see what they have. Lack of food causes death. Simple as it is, right? Much shorter than some of yours, right? And again, would you say it summarizes? I would say it really summarizes this small piece, because if there is a lack of food, you will die, right? As for the last one, why I said that your variant sounded a little bit like from Jane Austen's novel, again, because of the adjectives. I saw some adjectives like harsh, unpredictable. That's all good. Some variants are also, I would say, a little bit long. There are only 3 lines here, so your summary probably should fit within 1 line to make it really concise. Okay, the weather is impossible to predict due to instability of the climate. Interesting. Here, you see, they limited to just 4 words. British weather is changeable. And you might say that, yes, they are probably missing some elements of it. But again, summary summarizes the main idea, one main idea, without going into details. So here, the main idea is that weather is changeable rather than we're measuring precipitation or we're talking about dry or wet weather. You see my point? So for me personally, summaries are even more difficult than paraphrase, because paraphrase, you change the structure, you change the words, you kind of play with it, but you are stuck with the original text more. With this one, you probably need to really get the idea and then put it in your own words. And still you can't change the idea of the author, right? So this is a trick. Oh, people are saying lines in chat are shorter. Okay, fair enough, fair enough. But we wouldn't be counting words, but obviously if you can make it shorter, if it's just goes quickly, right? Then probably that's what we should go for, without any explanations, details. So I would eliminate details here. Okay, these were summaries. Now paraphrase. If we talk about paraphrase, I do know that some people experience difficulties with paraphrase because there is always a temptation to make your text as beautiful as the original, right? Because you are not, we are not, let's say, English native speakers, and we look at the text and we think, oh, how beautifully it is said. What if I kind of incorporate it the way it is? I know this feeling, I have it myself. If you're incorporating it as, well, as beautiful as it is, then probably you're using direct quotes. If you're still changing it, then it should be a paraphrase. So as for 4 steps, quite simple, but still I wanted to share that. Here, it's recommended to reread this passage you want to paraphrase many times. And here it's important to know the meaning of all the words, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to paraphrase. So you work with it until you really understand the meaning. Because you paraphrase quite short pieces of text, it's manageable. Then, and I think this is very important, and I would say it as a psychologist, psychologically speaking, you do need to do point number 2. When you do your paraphrase, you need to cover or hide the original passage, because again, as I said, the temptation to use the beautiful text of the native speaker, for example, or the person who wrote it is big. Temptation is big. So hide it, write the author's idea the way you understood it. And then after you finished writing, check that, well, check it against the original, that you haven't substituted anything. And finally, if you need some citation, and you do need a citation when you paraphrase, edit. These are the rules, simple. I would ask you to think in terms of 2 groups of strategies of paraphrase. First, what happens at the word level? So what do we do with words? And second, what do we do at the level of sentences when we paraphrase? Altogether, there would be about 6 to 7 strategies. I will show them on next 2 slides. So as for the word level, synonyms, that's 1. Yeah, okay, I'm counting here. What else? Word forms. What exactly you mean? Change word class. Yeah. So part of speech, let's say you had a noun, you make it a verb. You had a verb, you make it a noun, or adjective might be turned into adverb. Derivatives. Yeah, nice. Also, would you actually paraphrase all the words, or some of them will be taken the way they are and they cannot be paraphrased? If you sort of flip the construction into a negative one, maybe you might need an antonym or something. Yes, we do keep the terms. That's also a rule, right? If you have your professional jargon, if you have terminology that is, well, accepted and understood by everyone, or the opposite, it's quite a narrow term that, well, means something specific, you just use it the way it is, right? Personal names, obviously, right? Can you, okay, let's imagine we've taken the text, we used some synonyms, we used word, like class of words. We haven't changed the jargon, the terms, but there is always a question, how many words from the original text intact can you take? Where is this borderline? How many words can you take together from the original text? Maybe 2, 3, 4 maximum. I would say 2. I would say 2, maybe 3 if it's some what's the word, service words, да, служебные слова. So the less the better, that's absolutely true, because otherwise you might be blamed for plagiarism, right? You might be penalized for plagiarism. So the idea is that we don't even take so-called chunks. Why we change the word order, why we change the construction, because we don't want to take chunks as they are, because all the programs will detect where this piece goes from, right? So that's the rule. Okay, what about sentence level? Passive active, yeah, or active passive, obviously. However, we need to be careful right here, because not every sentence will have the same meaning if we keep flipping it, right? We all remember about this focus of the sentence, like theme and reme, and you can't simply put it the other way around and say, oh, that's the way it is. Sometimes the focus will change and you might be changing the author's idea. So with this one, we need to be careful. But yes, I would absolutely agree with changing the structure. So for example, you might use some, I don't know, introductory phrases through gerunds. you might be using some relative clauses or just general different clauses. So you take, maybe you have a simple sentence, you may make it a compound or a complex sentence. So from shorter sentences, you can make a longer one, then it would be called combining, right? Or if it's a huge sentence originally, you might probably want to cut it into smaller ones, and then they will be splitting. And yes, I see someone is writing splitting and combining. And absolutely for sure, word order. But again, word order is a difficult thing because it's not Russian language where we can freely play with the word order. You still need to follow the rules of English language, obviously. Some people like to use inversion, but here inversion is possible. But the question is it allowed in the text you are writing? Because inversion is more common for, let's say, fictional texts. And in some academic texts, inversion might look inappropriate. So here you need to be careful. So I just put this on 2 separate slides, tips for paraphrasing. Let's see, I think you've mentioned basically everything here. Use synonyms as often as possible. However, technical words, as we said, or specialized words, terminology will be unchanged because there is no need to change them. Then avoid using groups of words from the original passage. And if some words stay the same in the same order, 3 or more consecutive words, yes, you might need to use quotation marks. It might be considered, well, otherwise it would be considered plagiarism. And you change the word class, which you also mentioned. As for the sentence level, the tips are the following. You change the verb form or grammatical form of necessary, right? Or if possible, as you said, active, passive. Then you change the sentence structure, inversion, again, if it's possible, or you add maybe some clauses, gerunds, well, that depends, of course. And you combine or split sentences. And this is also an interesting point. I think we haven't mentioned probably this one. You do change the order of ideas. So let's say if there are certain points the author is covering, you don't have to, unless there is certain logic, you don't have to cover these points in the same order, right? So why not to put it differently, and then you will hide this kind of original piece. So the whole idea of paraphrasing, you can't show very openly, okay, this was the text I'm trying to use. So you need to make it very neat and very smooth, right? You use it, but it shouldn't be copy pasting. So changing the order of ideas and words, obviously, is another technique. Okay, there is original passage here. It's actually a small one. The beginning is the reference, and the passage itself is just the last 2 lines. Then I will have to open the next slide, which gives different choices of paraphrase. Your job, what you need to do now, you need to choose the best paraphrase out of 4 options. And you need to understand why other options are not, well, the best, are not appropriate, okay? So here is your sentence. These are the options. A is good one. I see. Most people agree that A would be appropriate, and it's absolutely right. A is the best variant. But before I open the answers, let us discuss quickly why other variants are not, well, as good as A. Okay. So what about B? Why are we not happy with B? So B has no citation. That's absolutely true. So here you will be, this would be considered plagiarism. C, too many words are the same with the original, you think, and D, different meaning with the original. So A is good, B, no citation, C, too close to the original. Okay. And then D, then, would you agree that it's It's not about the original piece. Right, you were right, absolutely. So A would be best. In B, there is no citation. C seems too similar. So maybe some of the strategies are used, but these strategies of paraphrase are not enough for the text to look like a new one, a different one. And D is simply inaccurate in terms of appropriation. So the author changed the meaning of the original piece. In D, you say you don't like the word visit. Yeah, because it changes the whole idea. You don't visit a space station, right? If we quickly look at the original sentence, leaving aboard a space station in orbit for months at a time poses problems for astronauts' bodies as well as for their minds. So if you stay for a long time, and if you leave there on a space station, it will influence immensely both your mental health and your physical health. So this D variant, when astronauts visit space station, visiting, it's like coming and going. So definitely it just breaks the whole idea of the original piece, right? Let's look at another one. On the left, you have original text. On the right, you have a new text, which is paraphrased. Would you say it's a good one or not? Well, here, because they changed the order, it's quite difficult to I would say that this dramatic growth refers to this one, sharpest growth. For me, if we compare sort of the movements of people here, for me, it's more or less the same. I see that the number of tourists rose and there was a dramatic growth in tourist numbers. 42 million people traveled. My answer would be here, unfortunately, we don't have the whole context to judge upon. When you paraphrase or when you use any original source, you never find, dangling paragraph out of nowhere. Of course, it's always in the context. Now let's look more linguistically at it. Are you happy with how the text was transformed? As for strategies, were they used? Maybe it's not the best. Okay, let's agree on this one. It's not the best, but well, I hope we can always do better, right? I would say that what happened in this paraphrase, let's try to analyze the good things about it. First of all, they were used various techniques, including change of ideas, change of sentence structure, word change of parts of speech. Meaning of the text hasn't changed. Maybe if you see this change, then, well, as I said, we need more context to make sure we understand it correctly. Then what is important, the source was cited correctly, right? I don't know if you noticed that. It was cited. And also, sentence structures changed, I mentioned that. So altogether, it's a fairly good paraphrase. Fairly good. Okay, let's just simply agree on this. But I'll give you another. Okay, sorry, I'm kind of rushing in my mind further. Let's look at this and see what exactly they did here. So first, for example, in the Netherlands, in the original text was an object. What did it turn into? It turned into subject. The Netherlands experienced something. Quite a common trick that we can use, that not something happens in some place, or someone experiences it. We have this typical for example, because I'm a psychologist, in psychological academic texts, we often have this. I will say it in Russian. например, нарушение развития у кого? У детей, in children, right? So children, it's not the subject of the sentence. What we can do when we paraphrase, we can take children as the subject, and we say that children experience or demonstrate or show or reveal, or, well, depending, right? So this is quite a common thing. And because, for example, like in Russian, we can do it easily. In English, I think this is a nice trick that you can use. What also was used here, not very big changes, but still, above 42 million became more than 42 million. The sharpest growth rate since 2006, the steepest in 12 years. Why not? Possible. The National Statistics Office, CBS, reported, according to the National Statistics Office. Again, quite a common thing when someone reports, someone states or someone claims, you say according to, right? That's another collocation that we use. Also subject-object change, so we change the construction. The number of foreign and domestic tourists rose, and then the Netherlands experienced dramatic growth in tourist numbers. You see, it even the place in the sentence, the beginning, the end, it might kind of migrate within a sentence if you change the construction. Now you will be doing something similar. There are two texts about ancient Egypt. What you need to do, let's assume from the beginning that that's a fine paraphrase, it's okay. What you need to do, you need to find how synonyms, strategy of synonyms was used, how word classes were used, word order was changed, and how sentence structures evolved. Well, first of all, I don't have all the synonyms, and I try to look only at just synonyms, not just constructions that are similar. So in this case, synonyms would be in color, right? So we had studies now, we have research, mud turns into deposits, droughts, long dry periods, society becomes civilization. And as for changing word classes, have you noticed this? Let's say Egypt becomes Egyptian, right? Noun becomes an adjective. Egyptian, Nile. And then mountainous regions. So it's adjective plus noun. Date, moved, right? The order of ideas changed. Okay. And as for the word order, again, there could be more. There are just a few things here. Ancient Egypt collapsed, or the collapse of Egyptian society began, right? This is how we change the word order in a sentence. And I don't know if you noticed this, the original text has 3 sentences, right? Whereas the second one has only 1. I don't know if you're happy with this one huge sentence. Probably I would be doing it in 2, but still cutting it a little bit, combining sentences, well, looks very neat here, looks nice. So this one, here we work only with synonyms, okay? So don't change the word order, don't change the construction, don't change anything rather than the synonyms. The emergence of auto industry collimates the growth of new capitalism. Honestly, I don't know the word collimates, so we'll have to check here. Do we need any preposition? Probably it needs with. Just that's my guess. Collimate with, or maybe not. But that's just my question. The development of automobile production coincidences, fancy, with the expansions of contemporary capitalism. It started in F&G, but not exploded growth. Yeah, France and Germany, but had explosive growth in the US. It commenced and became successful. So synonyms, unfortunately, in English do not work 100% interchangeably. So if you are picking a word and you think, okay, maybe it will work, my recommendation would be to use English dictionary, for example, Oxford or Cambridge, or I don't know which one you're using, Merriam-Webster, Macmillan. Go there, fill in, put the word there and check whether the meaning is the one you're actually aiming for. Sometimes there could be some small nuances of meaning and you use it as a synonym, but actually it's not exactly good here. That's just my concern, okay? With synonyms, be careful. Okay, right, so let me show you my variants and you can compare with yours if you have more. What you can say the rise of automobile industry matches the progress of contemporary capitalism. So parallels matches, I like this one. Development, progress, these two are very often used as synonyms. It started, right? And took off, accelerated. I also like the word accelerate, well, and it sounds even more formal to me, right? Because take off would be more on the neutral or even informal side because it's a phrasal verb. And then adapt becomes modified, production, assembly line, and it's actually a term. Both of them, production line, assembly lines, they're like terms. Car, motor, again, thus, thereby, or maybe you have some other variant, right? So that's one of the things we can do here. Now, let's look at this one. Here, I will ask you to do only the first, okay? Let's keep the second for the sake of time. I want you to change the word class in the blue words, so you will have to rewrite the sentence. But please do only the first. Managerial approaches offered by Alfred Sloan were helpful for General Motors to dominate in the world's car industry. Nice, that is smooth. The theories, how companies are organized and work, were helpful for General Motors to lead the industry. Changed it even more. General Motors started to dominate the world's industry in 1920s due to managerial theories by, maybe I would say, thanks to managerial theories introduced by Alfred Sloan, for example. Then we completely flip the parts of the sentence. Looks good. Yeah, all of you. I mean, what I've seen, that looks good. Let me show you what they suggest. They didn't change much of the structure here. In the 1920s, with help from managerial, exactly theories of Alfred Sloan, General Motors dominated the world's car companies. So here helped becomes with help, also possible with the help of, or with help from the managerial theories. Dominated, yeah, you wrote it. Now we'll just move on. And this one, pick one, whatever, which one you like, number one or number two. Pick one, and then here you need to change the word order. So you really need to sort of rewrite it. Maybe some other changes will be necessary too. The increasing military force of trade unions at this time defended their members' jobs. Interesting. I like it. The strongest brands are owned. Yeah, passive, right. Passive, active. Yeah, this is more or less what I wanted you to do here. Let me just show. So with the first one, at this time, increasingly militant trades unions defended their members' jobs. And some of the strongest brands in the world are owned. This is active passive voice, are owned today by the industry. So these changes alone, of course, look very small, right? But if you add, let's say, synonyms, if you add change of the word class or part of speech, maybe if you change the position of like the order of ideas as well, then it becomes a good paraphrase that will never be called plagiarism, right? So it's how many strategies you think it's a good idea to use at the same time? Because hardly ever you can use all of them, but minimum, how many would you say it's good? Well, I would say around 3 probably. And also some of these 2 would be fine. I would say 3. For me, I would say 3 would be fine. The question is, what strategies, if you are using, let's say, extensively synonyms, and then, well, my point here is that whatever strategies you use and what combinations, it doesn't matter, but your text should look different from the original one. Because using only synonyms, and if you keep the structure very similar, right, it will still look too obvious and too much similar with the original source. So whatever strategies you use in whatever combinations, make sure you change the original one, effectively. And yeah, that's the whole point. Now, a little bit, just 5 minutes of reporting verbs, and then we're coming to our final task. So reporting verbs, as you obviously remember, are verbs that help us to refer to someone else's idea and express his or her idea when you appropriate it into your own writing. So could you please look at each of pair of sentences here, A1, A2, B1, B2. They look absolutely the same. However, something is different. What would you say is different here? Intention. In what way? Of course, meaning would be different because assume and insist are kind of different verbs. Argue, suggest, kind of different verbs. All of them are different. But like in every pair of sentences, something is happening. I can even show like this. In the first, that would be insist, that I would like to point out. In the second one, that would be argue. So meaning seems the same, but, oh yeah, exactly, you're writing soft and weak, weak, strong. All reporting verbs have shades of, let's call it, strengths. And despite differences in meaning that we all kind of understand, they might be different in how strong they are. And altogether, there are 3 groups. Let's look at the first. The first group of verbs mean the writer has an inclination to believe something, but he's kind of hesitant. So he's not exactly sure. There is an inclination. So would you say it's a strong or a kind of a softer version of the verb? Yeah, of course, softer. Otherwise, well, that would be weird. So these verbs, we don't call them soft, honestly, because it's not the term, but we call them tentative or weak verbs, reporting verbs. As you can imagine, because there are 3 of them, the other one, the opposite, would be strong. And then the middle one is called neutral. Neutral are verbs that we say what the writer does or doesn't do. These verbs do not indicate any sort of value any judgment on the part of the writer. Okay, so they are quite, well, neutral. They come from the name. And the last one, this would be strong verbs. Here it means there is some position, strong position from the part of the author. What is the problem with all this? But for Russian speakers, or at least maybe not Russian, non-English L1 speakers, maybe sometimes it's not obvious which is which. And we might confuse, let's say, neutral and tentative, or neutral and strong. So there are tables of verbs, and you can find them online. Also, some verbs are given on your handouts, maybe for future reference. But I want you just to remember that verbs might differ. Let us choose only the tentative ones here and only the strong ones, okay? Well, the rest will be neutral, obviously, but yeah. Tentative and strong. Nice. Okay. Okay, I'll write them for you then so we can check. So insist, argue, you say, and emphasize. Good. Then tentative ones, you're saying that's going to be mention and imply, maybe question, suggest. Thank you. Suggest, mention, imply, maybe question. Maybe, we'll see. There are more for strong, but I think you got the idea. Yeah, emphasize goes into strong one. I think we all agree here. Affirm is a strong one. People say, okay, let me put it here as well. Affirm, and then we'll check. Looks like there should be one more strong, the fifth one. So we have insist, argue, emphasize, affirm. Any other? Believe, maybe believe. Okay, let's put believe and then we'll see. I will open the next slide with the answers, right? Okay, let's look at the tentative ones. You were right, absolutely, in suggest, imply, and question, whereas mention actually goes in the neutral one, because mention, it's more about speed of how quickly you talk about it. You mention it. It's something like kind of on the go, you know. It's not about not being sure. It's about, you might be sure or not, it's not the point. Mention is just, you quickly talk about it. So mention would be in the middle, whereas the strong ones, argue, believe, emphasize, insist, and affirm, and you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. Good. So these are the tentative, neutral, strong. That's not the full list, obviously, and there are lots of verbs. If you're not sure which are they, I would recommend to go to find this list online, to Google, maybe to check in the dictionary, to make sure that this strength, like not only the meaning of the verb, but also how strong it is or not strong, this is exactly what you want to use, right? So because if you want to say imply, you don't want to say emphasize instead of that. In fact, we rarely mix up tentative and strong because we kind of feel the difference. But if you're not sure about neutral and strong, for example, then maybe that's a good idea to check. Okay, and the last thing we will be doing is this exercise. You need to match the definition and the verb. these would be probably the most common used verbs, right? So, and I'm pretty sure you know all of them. There are also rare verbs, I mean, not that often used. Maybe you have your favorite verbs as well. I don't know, maybe they're not on this list. But again, the idea with reporting verbs, we use them for citations, for paraphrasing, for summaries. If you have a lot of these, try to use different verbs, because the classical mistake is students use simple ones like he thinks, he claims, he argues. He again claims, then again he argues, and it's all about the same thing. So try to use them in a smart way, okay? Again, check the meaning, check the strength, whether it's tentative or not, and so on. Now, we are coming to our last part. This is the key to this exercise. Now, my last few notes here before the last task. First of all, when we use, let's say, paraphrase or a summary, or when we use other people's sources, we would need to use some signal phrases to transition from that author to your ideas, right? So, and to implement those ideas in your text. So most common phrases could be something like according to someone, when you give a year, maybe, a recent study shows, and well, they're not the only ones, but still. But what you should remember, if you don't have any information that is not in the signal phrase, but is required, must appear at the end of the sentence as a citation, right? Or depending on the referencing style, it might be a footnote if you're using Chicago style. If it's APA, for example, then you need citation in parentheses. Each of these citations would depend, once again, on the style you're using. And the style usually depends on the article, for example, or sorry, on the journal you want to be published in. So this is what you start with. And but I'm sure you know this, right? Just as for how we integrate sources with summaries, because we know that summaries you might combine even several pages. Page numbers are not that necessary when you put a citation. So it might look like this. You put in well, depending on the referencing style, that would be brackets, for example, in text citation, but you don't need a page, right? Because summary might be like over, I don't know, 5 last pages, so no page necessary. Whereas when you integrate a source through paraphrase, paraphrase is not based on several pages. Usually it's like a paragraph or at least some piece of text. And then when you use your own words and use all the strategies we mentioned, you need to refer to the page, to the original page. So in a paraphrase, it's crucial to say which page you were using. And again, depending on the style, on the referencing style, your punctuation here would be obviously different, right? But yeah, you will be checking this. Now, this is the last thing. I'm going to show first an example and then a smaller piece for you to work with. So first I will ask you to read, this is an original source by scientist who studies creativity, creativity for language learners and in language classroom. So just please get the general idea of this text. Despite the fact that everyone understands that creativity is important in modern schools, we still see what we see, right? Dominance of teachers' opinion, not much creativity, and students who are more curious about learning process and have a lot of interest, they're not the focus of the teaching process, right? And so there is a long list of things that prove like kind of what is happening at schools and why creativity is not developed. So let's imagine I'm using this article. It's, well, more or less recent, well, 10 years ago. So I want to implement it in my text. So what I might be doing, let's say, let's imagine I want to use a summary. So I would start with an argument here, it's in blue, that modern educational system is experiencing an internal dissonance. That's my idea. Then I give a claim and I say, on the one hand, society expects 21st century students to use critical thinking, creative thinking, communication skills effectively. On the other hand, schools hinder the development of students' autonomy and flexibility. And to support my point of view here, which now is just my idea based on nothing, I want to prove that schools are actually not helping with students' autonomy, creativity, and flexibility. And I take the previous piece, right? And I implement it through a summary. Now we will not discuss whether it's the best summary or not, but I try to make it short. And in the gray, you will see that I'm using reporting verbs, and the blue is the amount of text that I have. So in her study of creativity of the modern educational system, Bogdana Stoyanova points out that modern teaching is not aimed at students curious and motivated to learn more. On the contrary, she argues that unfortunately teaching is still rigid, intolerant to students' mistakes, ignorant of their creative solutions, and teacher-centered. So once again, I started with an argument, then I had my claim, and then I used the source, the original source, as an evidence. And here I put it in a summary, as a summary, right? We know the rule, we don't need to mention the page, though we might, but I didn't. So I just say, I refer to the year of publication. And in the bibliography at the end of my text, we will have the reference. Another way to do it, the beginning is the same, right? But I might be using paraphrase here. As you see, the amount of text is much bigger, right? Because paraphrase is more or less the same size. I also use reporting verbs such as elaborate and some introductory phrases like it is suggested. I have the page number, which is amazingly high, like 3,000 something. But this is how I implement, again, this text. Again, just to prove my point of view. It's not dangling and hanging in the air. It is proving my position. You see, this is a longer variant. You don't need to read it. Well, you got the idea. And what I want you to do, here is the small piece here, starting from today. Today, dependence on human creativity. This is a piece. So this is our final part. Think, read it first, and think, how can you use it as an evidence? You can use it again you can summarize this text, or you can paraphrase it. Maybe now summary would be easier because of timing. But you need to think of the argument and some claim that you would prove using this piece of text, okay? generally the argument, it's, if you imagine a triangle, the argument would be the like general idea. Then you open it up through claims, and then to prove where these claims come from, why you say what you say, you need some evidence, and then you support your argument or your claims through the kind of evidence. Usually it looks like this, as a triangle or inverted triangle. So you start with an argument here, or it could be your global position. Then you have some claims, and then you have some evidence to support your position, something like this. But it's just super quickly, okay? My point was that whatever method of appropriating other one's text you're using, you need it for supporting of your position, right? As I said, it's not just he said and she said and then he said and she said. It's what you think and how it all fits together. So you prove it. That's why we need arguments and claims and all of that. Okay, you say claim is something you don't agree with. That depends, because terminologically speaking, there could be differences here. In this paradigm, I was just like using and explaining. Claim is something that kind of elaborates or enlarges the argument. Claim can also be something as a disagreement. It's just different, like, views, you know, on the word claim. There's also counter evidence or counter argument. Counter argument could be a different position, but that's a whole different story. We can't cover this here, unfortunately. Let me just finish up with summing up, right, quickly. So to appropriate someone else's text in your writing, well, of course, we would want to avoid plagiarism through citation summaries, paraphrases. If you use paraphrase, use different techniques, right? Better like 2-3 techniques to make it more successful. If you are summarizing, then make sure that it's not very long, that it's about 20% of the text. If you are appropriating someone else's text, you do need to use reporting verbs in correct meaning and strength, let's put it this way. And of course, finally, check the referencing style. So whether it's APA or Chicago or MLA or whatever you're using, right? And all these other people's writings are obviously necessary to support your argument as an evidence to what you think, to your position. Otherwise, these texts do not seem coherent, do not seem you know, logical if you're simply putting, you know, randomly the words of other people. And I found this metaphor somewhere online and I liked it. So if all these other person's writings just get into your text, you know, they get there like randomly, this looks like suspension bridge, but that's not very solid. You know, you can't use it to prove anything, or, well, you can't trust it. Whereas when you use the strategies effectively, like you summarize, you paraphrase, you cite well, you use reporting verbs, and you use it for your, like, to prove your position, then you can trust this work. So it's like a solid, nice bridge, something like this. I just like this metaphor I wanted to share. Okay, so references. Yeah, and have a nice evening, everyone. So bye-bye.